For those of you I haven't met before, I am Liam. I'm going to be taking you through SketchUp over the next few weeks. I've been using SketchUp for quite a long time now, about 10, 11 years or so, along with other 3D softwares, but SketchUp is one of my go-tos. I've done building design, interiors, landscaping, venue design, stage design, products, and everything in between. So SketchUp's a very versatile piece of kit. Good thing to learn. And luckily, it's quite easy to get stuck into. You can do something very, very quickly. So getting an initial 3D form or 3D shape will be very simple. And then getting something complex, the learning curve shoots up quite quickly. So I think, with SketchUp particularly, especially with jobs and careers that use the software, you're going to find 99% of people in a creative industry probably can use SketchUp, but then 9 out of 10 of those people can only draw a box and that's it. So, a lot of people say they can do 3D modeling, but that stops at anything past a very simple shape. And I'm not expecting any prior knowledge of the software. Obviously, if you have used it, it's beneficial. So we're going to start off with navigation and camera controls, which is going to include a variety of things. And towards the end of this exercise, we're going to be doing things like looking at the walk tool and saving views and creating animations and videos and a whole load of extra additional camera functions. So starting off basically navigating and maneuvering around a 3D space efficiently. And then we're going to be moving on to the drawing tools. So I think something from the off that's really important to understand about SketchUp is, unlike a lot of softwares, there's probably from the left-hand side, so from here, probably up to there, that's pretty much all of the drawing tools in SketchUp. There's about 10 tools that you need to know. So you're doing an awful lot with a very small, concise tool set. And that means a couple of things. That firstly means you really have to understand the ins and outs of how these work, because you've only got these to play with. So you really need to know everything that can be utilized and achieved with them. Secondly, you need to know about the multiple functions they each have. For example, the move tool can do 4 or 5 different things. So it's really about mastering the individual tools and not so much about remembering how to draw a specific object. So I always say to people, looking up a tutorial on how to draw a door isn't that useful. Looking up a tutorial on how does the line tool work and looking at all the different ways you can use it, that's really useful, because then you can do that. You can draw a million different things with that function. So the way we're going to address this and start this off is basically by looking at these tools in isolation and doing mini tasks, kind of getting you comfortable with how each of these functions works. So a roller mouse is very, very useful indeed for any design software, but SketchUp in particular. So highly recommend using one. So to start with, we are going to open up a resource file. So you guys online should have access to the resource folder. If you don't, I can share it with you. You give me a shout. Just for future reference for everyone, anything that is an SKB file is a SketchUp backup file. It's an autosave. So a SketchUp file is actually an SKP instead of an SKB. And it should look something like this when it opens, all going well. And don't worry if your screen looks nothing like mine. We'll sort that out in a minute. People might have different tools and things open at the moment, but we will sort that out momentarily. So just so people get this open, basically we've got a cul-de-sac street here. Really simple little drawing, nothing impressive, just in copy and pasted houses that I drew up. But it gives us a nice chance to look at cameras and perspective and things like that. So the first thing we're going to need to make sure is that we all have the same tools active. And some people may not. You might have lots of different things on your toolbars at the top. So there are 2 ways of doing this. If you are on a Windows, you just right click on your toolbar and you get a list. So if you right click anywhere on that top bar on your screen, you'll get a whole list of tools. If you usually use a Mac, or you are using a Mac today, then you go to View and Customize toolbar at the bottom, and it will do the same thing. So Windows, right click the toolbar. On a Mac, you go to View and Customize toolbar. But you will have the same tools. My icons might look slightly different to some of yours just because I'm not quite sure why, but this one hasn't updated to the latest version where all the icons are now basically blue. Same tools, they just made them all blue, just so you can't tell them apart very easily, which is nice. So the tools we're going to need, let me just get them ready. Camera, getting started, styles. Oh, these four, that will do. So getting started, styles and views. Everything else you can close on your toolbar. And again, if you're on a Mac, you're going to have to go on View, Customize Toolbar, and you drag and drop the ones you want onto the toolbar at the top. And I'll give everyone a couple of minutes to get this sorted out. So especially on a Mac, it can be a little fiddly. If you need to move anything around, you can drag the tool sets, rearrange them, reposition them as well. You should have these four things active. Alrighty. So, okay. So hopefully we will have our tools set up. Now, a couple of things to point out, I guess, before we kick off with these is firstly, there are a lot of tools that appear on my toolbar, for example, when I right click. A lot of these are plugins. They don't come with the software. We use these for the advanced course. And secondly, a lot of them, like this one, for example, are just different formations of tools that you've already got at the top there. So the point I'm making is that everything you've got here is, 90%, 95% of the tools in the software. This is the vast majority that you're looking at here. So just because there is a lot in this toolbar, you're not missing out. And secondly, this default tray. So this is something you won't see on a Mac. You won't have this default tray. Now, whenever we do use something from it, and I will make a point of it, then to open it, so to open, let's say, materials, for example, instead of going on this tray, you would go to Window, and then there'll be a materials option. So anything on a Mac that you want to open from the default tray, you open under the Window tab at the top. All the same options, tools, but they're under the Window tab, basically, is the idea. And again, I'll point it out when we need it. Apart from that, software is fairly similar. The layout of the software, they've made this as accessible as possible. Your creation and modified tools are obviously at the top. Your default tray is your settings and options, things like layers, materials, save views, shadows, things like that. Settings and options are your default tray. And then your bottom right corner, you should have a measurements box. Now, anything you enter, whether it's an angle, a measurement, whatever it might be, will always come up in that one box. That is where all of the units are located. So therefore, anything you type, you don't have to click on it or do anything. It will always appear in that box at the bottom. So question I get quite early on a lot of the time is people click on it and they say nothing's happening. It's not going to, because anything you type is always going to come up there, regardless of whether you're clicking on it or anything else.
That's the same on a Mac, is it?
Same on a Mac. So yeah, the only real differences between Mac and Windows generally are default tray location and the shortcuts. Anything that is control on a Windows is normally option on a Mac. That's pretty much it. And again, I'll point out any differences as we go. So we have our little cul-de-sac street here. Now, cameras. First thing we need to note about cameras, there are some little house symbols at the top. They are your standard views, they are called. And these are how you switch between different views of the model you are drawing. If you're used to, AutoCAD and things like that, you would think of these as elevations. This is how you look at the different angles of your model. You can also access them under camera and standard views, but it's quicker just to click on these house symbols. But either way, we'll open these up. And these are obviously very useful for presenting a document, but they're equally useful for drawing. If you're designing, let's say, a cabinet, you probably want to draw it from the front because that makes more sense than designing it from the top. So, depending on what you're designing it in the correct view is going to be important. And I'm going to be talking about these a lot. So when we do a drawing exercise, I'll probably say switch to top view, and I'm talking about these house symbols, for example. There aren't any shortcuts by default attached to these. unless they've changed it on the most recent version. I don't think they have. However, you can change any shortcuts you would like under Window and Preferences. There is this shortcut menu. Please try and avoid doing it on the studio computers because that will get really confusing. But if you would like to do that at home, there is a shortcuts menu under the Preferences, which is under Windows. So Window Preferences has the SketchUp options, and you can change the shortcuts for anything you like. There isn't actually too much you need to change on the options on SketchUp. Anything we come across, I will mention as we go, but you're pretty much good to go straight out of the box. So your standard views, like we said, are at the top. Now, if I go to, let's say top view, for example, right? This is technically looking down from the top. So it is an aerial view, but it's not really what you'd expect to see if you were looking at the plan of this street. So if the first thing about SketchUp cameras is to use standard views, then the second most important information is that you have two types of camera you're going to be using, and those are under camera. They are called perspective and parallel projection. These are crucially important. Again, I'm going to be mentioning them a lot when we are drawing. So perspective camera has a field of view or a wide angle lens, which allows you to see things at different perspectives. Parallel projection is if you were looking at things directly straight on. Now this floor plan looks a lot, well, this top plan looks a lot more like a plan view would, and so will all of my other elevations, because I'm looking at them without perspective. So first thing I want you guys to do is just try and switch between the two, look at a couple of these standard views and just get an idea of how it's changing. Just for a minute or so, and then I'll add a little bit of information in as well. And remember to change the type of camera you're using. That is camera and then parallel or perspective.